The federal government is the largest energy consumer in the country. Last year, it launched an initiative to reduce federal emissions to net zero. The General Services Administration is leading the effort to transform all government buildings into sustainable facilities. Robin Carnahan is the agency's administrator. Administrator Carnahan, welcome to the program. Nice to have you.
Thanks, great to be here.
So what does achieving net zero emissions mean for federal buildings?
It means that we're going to be leading by example in the federal government about what's possible when it comes to changing the portfolio of our energy use. You know, as you mentioned, the federal government is the largest buyer of electricity and energy in the country, and we can sort of change the market and have an impact on that. So it's GSA plus the Department of Energy plus the Department of Defense that are the big buyers. And so one of the things we're trying to do is figure out how to have carbon-free energy. Right? That's a trend all around the United States and the world. And it's growing in the private sector and the private utility companies. So we're working with them to be able to make sure that government buildings are able to buy that carbon-free energy. And the president has a goal of by 2030, for all of our energy to be carbon-free.
So what does that mean? Are you just going to be slapping on solar panels on federal buildings?
It's really an all of the above approach. It will be some of those, but this needs to be utility scale, right? This needs to be utility companies doing this kind of work. So we've entered into an agreement already with one of the major utilities in the South. It's called Entergy. It's in Arkansas. And the idea is to make it so all of our federal facilities in that region are able to have, it's called 24/7 renewable energy. And so what that means is we're matching our demand to their supply of carbon-free energy, and it's fantastic. So what we're going to do is have what's called a green tariff with the utility regulators in Arkansas. And the cool thing is, once the federal government has that tariff that says we want matched carbon-free energy for all of our facilities, private companies can buy into that as well. So it really is sort of leading the market on this. And it's not just solar panels, it's whatever is carbon-free energy. So part of what's in the supply at Energy in Arkansas is nuclear. So it is really an all-of-the-above approach when it comes to getting energy independent and having it be carbon-free.
Well, let's talk about the funding, because GSA received nearly $3 billion.
3.4, actually.
So over $3 billion from both the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. Can you give us a general breakdown of that funding?
Yes. So it's about $3.5 billion of the infrastructure bill, and a lot of that money primarily is going to be used for land ports of entry. What does that mean? That's border crossings. And so we're going to be upgrading 26 border crossings on both the northern and the southern borders. Smart, because it's good for security, right? It's good for supply chain. It's good for the economy and just sort of general ease of movement back and forth across the borders. So $3.5 billion, working closely with Homeland Security on that. We also have $3.4 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act. That's primarily focused on these renewable and sustainable initiatives. We're going to be able to leverage these funds together and make a real difference on some things. I was just in Arizona.
Tell me about that trip.
So it was very interesting. I was there just before the holidays, and it's the second busiest land port in Arizona. 3 million people and 3 million cars and 2.5 million people cross that border every year. It's a big place for migrant workers that come back and forth, and most of our winter lettuce comes from the workers that do things in southern Arizona and cross back across that border every day and every night. So we're going to be investing there. It's the first tranche of money to go out in the Inflation Reduction Act, and we're going to be able to make that a net zero building, which is incredible, and also meet all the needs of the Department of Homeland Security. So we're really excited about it. That is an area that has, they told me, 360 days a year of sun. So you talked about solar panels. Makes a lot of sense for us to put that there.
It is sunny in Arizona.
And so what this means is this is not just about the sustainability. It's about good jobs. It's about building a clean energy economy. And it's about saving money, because in the end, all of these investments save money because we're lowering energy costs.
You know, I do want to ask you about all that, but there's a lot of projects out there. There's a lot of ports and things that need upgrading and buildings. How do you prioritize? How do you select which ones get funding?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of that comes from Congress, right? So we see that in some of our budget bills that come through. Some of that comes from our partners. So the Department of Homeland Security can prioritize which of the projects need the investments to help them meet their mission. And when it comes to the sustainability money, right, we want to figure out where we can have the biggest impact, right? We have a huge portfolio that has lots of different kinds of buildings, but we know that we can up some investments that move things to LEED Platinum instead of LEED Gold, or could be fully renewable. And so we want to have some marquee projects that show what's possible, but overall the goal here is job creation, saving money for taxpayers, and helping the planet.
Administrator, when you say saving money, these things cost money to retrofit buildings, to bring in green technologies. How do you balance the cost that's going in with the potential savings? Because it's not necessarily going to save money, especially in the short run.
So you're right. Investments take time. It's the same in our homes. If we think about if you upgrade the windows in your house, it takes some time for that to pay back. But over time it does. And so the good news here is for the federal government, we own these facilities for a long time. So for us, it makes sense to make investments that are going to lower operating costs. We've been doing this for years. I was out in New Carrollton back last year with Secretary Granholm, and we were able to do some basic things like changing out light bulbs and putting in new chillers and making it a smart building and adding some solar panels. We cut energy consumption by 60%. That changes the greenhouse gas emissions of that building, and it changes the cost to taxpayers. I was up in Portland, Maine. We have a 150-year-old custom house building. We put in new heat pumps in that building, cut energy costs by 30% by doing those investments. So we're just going to be doing more of those kind of smart things, because these are buildings that are going to be around a long time. We want to make them efficient.
Robin, you talked about there's something called low embodied carbon. What does that mean?
Funny you should ask. I didn't really know what that was a year ago, but it turns out it is a big deal. So if you think about emissions, you think about you burn fossil fuel in your car and there's an emission, or you turn on your heater or air conditioner and there's an emission because you're burning some kind of fuel. So that's a type of emission, and carbon, but embodied carbon is a little bit different. It's the things that it takes to build the house. It's the things that it takes to build the car, and what is the carbon that is emitted in that process. So that's how you should think about it. Turns out, this is a really interesting fun fact, that of all the fleet, and GSA has one of the biggest fleets in the country of cars, and one of the biggest portfolios of buildings in the country, of all the emissions of our cars and our buildings, what we buy, the carbon that's emitted from that, is double. So that's why it's a big deal. That's why you want to get a handle on the embodied carbon. And so we got in the Inflation Reduction Act $2 billion of that 3.4 to have low embodied carbon building materials. What does that mean? So the big emitters of the stuff that we buy is asphalt, concrete, glass, and steel. So if you think about land ports of entry, they're going to have a lot of asphalt and concrete and steel and glass. And so if we can reduce the carbon it takes to build those things, we are reducing greenhouse gases. And so it's been really interesting. I visited an asphalt plant. Who would have thought I'd be interested in this? But an asphalt plant out in Arizona when I was there. We've already used them for some of the work. And it turns out you can reduce the embodied carbon of these projects by 40–50% with hardly any change in cost, by just doing some smart recycling. So we're excited about it. The other funny thing, let me just tell you, is I was out at a meeting not long ago giving a talk, and there were a bunch of Girl Scouts there, and they had hats on that said, "Ask me about embodied carbon." So this is the thing. This is a thing.
It's a thing now.
Yes.
Well, you had mentioned that these projects are going to be job creators.
Yes.
Give me a little bit more information. How many jobs will these create?
Yeah, look, you're always doing job estimates and creation estimates with these things, but we predict that this is going to create 10,000 jobs annually. these investments here in the United States, American jobs. So we're excited about that.
You have already completed some building projects. Talk about the timeline from funding to breaking ground to completion.
Yeah, look, we all know building projects take some time, and it all depends on, for government projects, how much of it gets funded, right? So sometimes it's partially funded and you have to wait a little while. But we're expecting these things to really kick into gear because the funding we have, particularly for the land ports of entry, is enough to get these projects done. So we are in the planning stages, and you know, sometimes it requires acquiring land, which means you're dealing with folks in the communities, and we're trying to be good neighbors and make sure that we're thinking of all the equities in the communities that we're serving. So it takes a few years, but trust me, folks are really excited about it, and some of the projects are already moving.
Well, speaking of that, talk about the state and local level collaboration that you'll need to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I come from state government, right? So that's the thing that I think about all the time, is how these federal investments can help leverage sort of interest that is already happening in these communities. And you know, I was visiting Portland, New Hampshire not long ago, and there's a federal facility we're disposing of that's in the middle of this town that's going to have a huge impact on the community. And so we just need to be very intentional about how we do that. And I was in Toledo recently, and we were able to help that city as we did an expansion of a courthouse with some urban planning, and it's going to just catalyze development in a whole new part of town. And so it's pretty exciting for me as somebody who, as I said, comes from state and local government, to see the federal government actually being pretty helpful with this.
And you know, Made in America is a big push for the administration, as is protecting the supply chain.
Yes.
So how is GSA incentivizing that local manufacturing for all these new materials that need to be created?
Well, look, we're always looking for opportunities to create jobs in the United States, and when we have production in the United States, that's the best way to do it. I was just recently, as mentioned, Toledo. I was out there with Secretary Buttigieg at a hot briquetted iron, it's called, plant, and it used to be a brownfield, so you know, closed up, messy place that they've turned into a low carbon iron facility. Which, what does that turn into? That low embodied carbon steel. And that's rolled steel that makes cars, and these are great jobs in America. And so when we talk about buying low embodied carbon stuff, we can be doing that and driving this green energy economy. So that's what we're focused on.
So nice to talk to you. Thanks so much. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.